Okay, well, this has been one hell of a thing to set up. So my Mac went out today when I was trying to set up to record. I could not get it to turn on. So I am had to get Beatrix's old Mac that she used to use for work that she no longer uses anymore because she has a new one and set it up. As you can see, I have a video set up that we're going to be listening to. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Charlie Kirk Memorial before we dove into the rest of the stuff I had to talk about. I have all kinds of things on my mind to talk about, and but I wanted to dive into the Charlie Kirk Memorial first, and I have all kinds of notes here. So the first thing that came to mind when I was watching it, I watched the entire thing last Sunday, um, and the first thing that came to my mind was this is 100% Protestant and it is 100% um excuse me, and it is 100% American. They had the pyrotechnics that they're getting a little bit of criticism for from people that don't understand what Turning Point USA was. That was definitely kind of like a nod to Charlie Kirk. He insisted on doing things like that at speaking events. He really enjoyed that kind of stuff, from what I understand. And so they were kind of giving him a nod there. And then there were other people that were getting criticized for their speeches. Stephen Miller was one, gave a fiery, hellfire and brimstone type speech, and Trump was another. And I wanted to start off with Trump's comments, where he's talking about how Charlie Kirk was a better man than him. And that's kind of what I got from this. I'll play the comments first. I'll tell you what people are saying afterwards, and then I'll kind of tell you how I took his comments. It looks like I'm going to have to start the short over because it getting this set up was a real pain in my butt.
In that private moment on his dying day, we find everything we need to know about who Charlie Kirk truly was. He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent. Charlie's angry. Look at that. He's angry at me now. He wasn't interested in demonizing anyone. He was interested in persuading everyone to the ideas and principles he believed were good, right, and true in that private.
So a lot of people are saying that, that was a petty thing to say. You shouldn't be saying things like that at a funeral or at a memorial service, whatever. We're going to get into some comments here pretty soon of a couple of people that had things to say about the memorial service in general, but um the way I took those comments was Trump was uh, putting Charlie over. So he was disparaging himself, saying, "Hey, I'm not a good enough man to not hate my opponents. I'm not a good enough man to wish the best for my opponents. I'm not as good of a man as Charlie Kirk was." And that was kind of what I got from it. Sounded like the crowd kind of took it the same way I took it. Him being a little, disparaging to himself, telling a joke at his expense, making Charlie look like the bigger man. That's the way I took it. I thought that's the way it should have been taken. I mean, he's paying respects to Charlie Kirk, but not everybody's going to take it that way. Not everybody has, gives grace to Donald Trump, especially. One thing I've been trying to maintain during this entire situation since the assassination of Charlie Kirk is that all these people that are mourning in public, whether it be Megyn Kelly or Candace Owens or Jack Posobiec or Benny Johnson, Donald Trump, JD Vance, any of them, that they should be given some grace. I've lost a very, very, very close friend in my life. And I didn't have to do it in the public eye. I didn't have the responsibilities of being in the public eye 5 days a week. And actually, the very opposite was the case. I was an over the road truck driver. I hadn't yet started my podcast. And so I was completely alone to deal with the struggles of losing somebody that was that close to me. And it's very hard. It takes you a lot of time to come to terms with the fact that that person is no longer there. And so I give grace to the people that are mourning in public. And I think it would be best if everybody did that, but unfortunately, not everybody is capable of doing that. Seeing that guy makes me think of Matthew Erickson. Not because he looks like Matt, but because of something Matt said when he popped up on screen. He's like, "Oh, what a face!" But anyway, so now I have a couple of clips here, a couple little shorts from JD Vance speaking, and I thought JD Vance did a really good job paying respects to Charlie Kirk. They were, from what I understand, they were very, very close, and he took it really, really hard when Charlie died. And and it's like I said, it's you can't expect perfection from these guys when they're mourning in public. Um, they're gonna make mistakes, and they're gonna let their anger get the best of them at times. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. And when it's understandable to a point. I mean, they're having human emotions and they're dealing with these very, very raw human emotions in the public eye. So I grant a little grace.
Charlie suffered a terrible fate, my friends. We all know it. We all saw it. But think, it is not the worst fate. It is better to face a gunman than to live your life afraid to speak the truth. It is better to be persecuted for your faith than to deny the kingship of Christ. It is better to die a young man in this world than to sell your soul for an easy life with no purpose, no risk, no love, and no truth. Christ told us in the Gospel of John, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Charlie took heart, and now we must do the same. I've seen so many of you say, so many on social media, talk about for Charlie. We must do this for Charlie. For Charlie, we will speak the truth every single day. Charlie suffered a...
And one of the things that people have been pointing out, Erica pointed it out in her speech, and she was like, whenever this happened, you didn't see riots or arson, you didn't see revolution, you saw revival. There was a lot of stories about people turning, back to Christianity, back to their foundation, going back to church for the first time in years, opening a Bible for the first time in years, praying for the first time in years. And, that's the way we should deal with loss like this and with tragedy like this. And, Charlie was the biggest of of the violent um the victims of violence. He was kind of the most well known, and really rallied support around him. And he's getting a lot of criticism from like AOC and Destiny. And one of the things that you realize is it's very possible, once we dig into this Tyler Robinson kid's ideology and figure all everything out about him, it's very, very possible by listening, just from listening to the rhetoric of Ilhan Omar and Destiny and AOC, it's very possible this kid is just a mainline Democrat. He's just he's just a mainstream Democrat, and they've moved so far in the direction of radicalization that um, that it wouldn't shock me if he just had basic Democrat ideals and just was gay for trannies. That's I mean, there's all kinds of stories about the possibility of him being deep into furry porn culture and whatever that means. I'm not willing to go check it out. That's not something I want to see. But anyway, here's another clip from JD's speech at Charlie's memorial.
I can't help but think that they tried to silence my friend Charlie Kirk. They tried to silence our dear friend Charlie Kirk. And tonight, we speak with Charlie and for Charlie louder than ever. The evil murderer who took Charlie from us expected us to have a funeral today, and instead, my friends, we have had a revival in celebration of Charlie Kirk and of his Lord Jesus Christ. We gather here in this stadium in the hot Arizona sun, shielded in a great shining city our fathers raised out of the desert. And from this desert, Charlie Kirk built a movement. He transformed the face of conservatism in our own time, and in doing so, he changed the course of American history. To rising generations across this country, Charlie exemplified kindness, courage, and a commitment to open debate. And he was a great debater, and we loved him for it. But Charlie loved debate not because he excelled at it, but because it was the vehicle for bringing the light of truth to dark places. And Charlie Kirk brought many truths in his life. Charlie brought the truth that young people deserved a stake in the future and that they deserved to have a voice. He brought the truth that marriage and family were the highest callings, far more important than any job or educational credential. He brought the truth that our nation would fade unless it brought order to its neighborhoods and prosperity to its people. He brought the truth that life was precious and we must fight to protect it at all stages and at all times.
So, and I think JD did a pretty good job of paying respect to Charlie Kirk, paying respect to his memory, and paying respect to what his calling in life was and what he did, and really really showed how much he cared about Charlie in the comments that he made. So, I thought JD did a really good job. I haven't heard anybody criticizing him. There was one part, I couldn't find a clip of it, but there is one part where he talks about how he didn't spend he's talked more about Jesus the last 2 weeks than he had publicly than he has ever in his life, and that if you learn one thing from Charlie, it was that when you see evil, you confront it and you call it out for what it is. And I thought that was a really powerful part of his speech. I know he's been getting a lot of shit for some of the other stuff he said on different platforms, but I wanted to kind of cover a little bit of this the Kirk memorial because I know a lot of people are putting a lot of time into it, and there were things that I wanted to say about it that I hadn't heard very many people say. Um, and then there's this really exceptionally powerful moment from Erica, um, where she publicly forgives the young man that assassinated her husband. Very powerful. I can't imagine how anybody heard this the first time and didn't cheer up.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life. That young man, on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Love for our enemies and love for those who persecute us.
Hey, is somebody cutting onions in here? No, I'm just saying. And one of the things I found interesting, Megyn Kelly has had a chance to sit down with Erica. It looks like we're going to have to deal with part of an ad here in a second. Okay. Well, hopefully we can get through that pretty quick. But Megyn Kelly had said she's had some opportunities to spend some time with Erica um, over the last couple of weeks, and she said it's really interesting that the entire time they're talking, she's able to keep a conversation. She's able to have a conversation. Her voice isn't breaking. She's not sobbing or anything like that, but there's a constant flow of tears coming from her eyes as she's going through her day and dealing with people. And man, that's just crazy. That's just a crazy thing that she has the strength to keep going and not just stop and break down. So, Father Josiah Trenum, y'all may have seen him on Tucker. What was it? Was it last? I think it was last week that Tucker did the well, not a round table, but he had a couple of people on to talk about Charlie Kirk, and Father Josiah was on there, Um, and he's a very popular Orthodox priest in the California area. Can't remember exactly where. I think it's near LA. I want to say. I'm I don't I don't know. I think it's near LA. Um, it doesn't say here in the example, but he talks about Erica forgiving the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk. Got to say that for legal purposes, alleged, even though it looks like a pretty cut and dry case. He allegedly shot Charlie Kirk. So here's Father Josiah talking about that. We'll get through this ad as soon as we can. Hopefully it won't take very long.
For your words, create.
Hey everyone, God bless you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I've prepared a reflection for you entitled Erica's Forgiveness. I was deeply moved watching the funeral of Charlie Kirk that was taking place in Glendale, Arizona yesterday on the 21st of September. I was watching his funeral really with a sense of the value and the beauty of the cross of Jesus, because we Orthodox have been celebrating the exaltation of the cross for 8 days. On the 14th of September every year, we Orthodox bring the cross out, process with it, and place it in the middle of our churches on a feast called the Exaltation of the Cross. And then for 8 days it remains there, and it's prostrated before, it's lovingly kissed and venerated every morning and every evening at services for a full 8 days. This has been extremely potent this year as our country has been really gripped by the sorrowful murder of Charlie Kirk, which took place on the 10th of September. So just 4 days later, we brought the cross out. And then for these last 8 days, culminating yesterday in the leave-taking of the feast, which happened to be the funeral of Charlie, we have been under the shadow of the cross, very much thinking about the cross, kissing it and renewing our devotion to honoring Jesus' cross, to remembering who we are, that we Christian believers are those who are forgiven by the grace of Christ, through his cross saved.
This is the quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
The number one food for regular.
And we're bearers of the cross, people who hold the cross up. The cross dictates, it forms and fashions our disposition to life and to death. Our sublime practices in the church, bowing before the cross, kissing the cross, embracing the cross, with the goal of assimilating our lives to the cross, to imitate Jesus in our own little way, in our own lives. Very sublime. The reading from the epistle yesterday for the Sunday, appointed for the Sunday after the Feast of the Exaltation of the Cross, comes from St. Paul's epistle to the Galatians chapter 2, where he says, I have been crucified with Christ. And it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. What a magnificent testimony to how the cross has changed our life and how we can become assimilated to the cross itself and live a cross life, so to speak. St. Paul says that he no longer lives. He didn't mean that he was not in existence. He meant he no longer lives as he used to live. He says, I am crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but the life that I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. For Christians, everything changes after baptism, where we are literally united, as St. Paul says in Romans 6, where we're literally united to Jesus' death and to his resurrection. We live life under the cross, before the cross. With that as the context in which I watched the funeral yesterday, I was deeply moved by an expression of this when Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, came to the podium and with tears publicly forgave Tyler Robinson, her husband's murderer.
That man, that young man, I forgive him.
What a magnificent moment. What a truly Christian moment. When I was watching it, I just wept for the sheer beauty of it. Erica has a first love, and it's not Charlie. It's Jesus Christ. And Charlie was, what shall we say, her second love, or her first earthly love, but not her first heavenly love. It made me think of the woman caught in adultery who was brought to Christ, and how Christ forgave her and helped her face her sins and be done with them. Absolutely magnificent. Erica's attitude towards her husband's murder also made me think of one of our recent saints who is such an example of this, and I hope Erica will learn about her and take great consolation and guidance and inspiration from Saint Elizabeth the New Martyr, who was murdered by the communists in Russia in 1918. But prior to that, in 1905, I should say something about it. Saint Elizabeth was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria of England and part of the nobility also of Germany. Queen Victoria was her grandmother on her mother's side. Queen Alice was her mother. She was married in 1905 when she was 20 years old to the Tsar, the last Tsar of Russia, Tsar Nicholas II's brother, Grand Duke Sergius, and lived a beautiful life with him until in 1905 he was murdered by a vicious anarchist who despised him. This man, Grand Duke Sergius, was leaving the Kremlin in his carriage, and this terrorist came up to him and threw a bomb into his cart, his carriage. The bomb landed on his lap from a distance of only 4 feet, and it blew Sergius to pieces. Elizabeth was not far away. She, in fact, came immediately to his aid, and having heard the blast, she went to the blast spot and found only pieces of her husband. She immediately knew what happened. She picked up a portion of his torso, a foot in a boot here, pieces of flesh there. In fact, she found his heart on the top of a neighboring building. She put them all the pieces of her husband, on a stretcher, and she took his remains into the St. Alexis Chapel in the Kremlin, which is a holy place that she would be devoted to for the rest of her life. She simply laid on her husband's remains, simply laid on the stretcher.
Watch how butter affects love handles.
The reason butter is called butter is because
very much like Erica laid on the coffin of Charlie. That place in St. Alexis Chapel would be a place of holy devotion for St. Elizabeth for the rest of her days. 2 days later, Elizabeth, she went by Ella. Ella insisted on going to visit her husband's murderer in jail. And that's exactly what she did. She brought him a Bible and a small icon of Christ, our Savior. She assured him, Kalyev was his name, she assured the murderer Kalyev of her forgiveness. And then she asked him most sincerely to repent before he died so that he might be saved, so that the Lord Jesus might forgive him. He was hanged 2 days later. Side note, that's basic and important justice. It's what Christian nations do if you want to protect people and show the value of life. Ella erected a massive cross on the spot of her husband's death. I hope something similar can be erected at Utah Valley University. That holy place marking Grand Duke Sergius's death was torn down by Vladimir Lenin himself with his own hands, that disgusting monster. Stalin later had the monastery itself and the tomb blown up, but in 1990, the vault containing Serge's remains was discovered and taken to the Cathedral of the Archangel. St. Elizabeth, on the eve of her tonsure into monasticism, wrote a letter to Tsar Nicholas II in which she shared some of Serge's last words. And listen to this. It's so, I think, illustrative and important for us today here in America, suffering what we have. This is what Ella said to the Tsar about her husband's death, about Serge's death. She said, "Serge died with joy for you and for his country." How many people said that at Charlie's funeral yesterday? Serge died with joy for you and his country. It was 2 days before that he said how willing he would give his own blood if thereby he could be of help. I hope God may give him strength, and that never one can say I was unworthy of having been in olden times guided by such a true and noble husband and such a true Christian. If you'd like to listen more to the life of St. Elizabeth, the new martyr, you can go to the Patristic Nectar app and go to the Synaxarion to July 5th, where her life is recorded, and you can hear more about it. What magnificent forgiveness Christians have to offer. And may God bless Erica Kirk and the whole Kirk family. God be with you.
Hi, friends. Lila.
Okay. I don't know who this lady is here. But I liked, I enjoyed that message when I heard it earlier. And before we get to some scumbaggery of people tearing down the memorial service of Charlie, I figured that would be a good message to hear. Obviously, we have to hear from this guy because he always has something to say, and it's usually pretty insane. If you didn't watch the memorial service of Charlie Kirk, I want to say it started at around, I want to say 10 o'clock Central Time, 10 Central, 11 Eastern, and then I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning there in Arizona. Was that Mountain Time or whatever it is? And it started off with some musicians. They were your basic Protestant, like, praise musicians, nothing spectacular. I think there were 4 or 5 of them that played. One band played like 5 songs, and then there was like a lull for like 30 minutes or so, and then they did like four bands in a row or something like that, and then the speaker started getting up there, and they played the Amazing Grace. They had a Scottish band playing bagpipes and playing Amazing Grace. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. I might try to see if I can find that real quick here in a second, and let y'all listen to that because it was really beautiful. I enjoyed that. But then they had the speakers come up, and it started off with I want to say it was like Mikey McCoy, who was Charlie's his personal assistant. And then you had Andrew, how do you say his name? Is it Klovek? Klovek, something like that, who was Charlie's executive producer. I think Blake Neff spoke, if I'm not mistaken. Then Jack Posobiec, and it just kind of went down through several speakers. There wasn't a whole lot of time between speakers. They did a good job of pacing. You could tell it was a turning point event, the way that it was produced and put together. It was really good. But Don Lemon has opinions, and it took me a while to find a shortened video. His original video on this was like 5 minutes long, and it was just some like weird rant. I couldn't tell what he was talking about. He was talking about some lady who has a Jamaican lady cleaning her house and blah, blah, blah. It was weird. And I was like, I need to find a shorter one, but this one's like a minute and a half. and it gets to the heart of what he had to say about the Charlie Kirk Memorial. Remember what I said? It was 100% Protestant, 100% American, 100% Turning Point. I mean, it was it was what I expected. I mean, maybe better than I expected because I did really enjoy the speakers that spoke.
It was a revival meeting wrapped in a memorial, a political rally dressed as church. And by the end of the night, it was clear this was not only about Charlie Kirk's death, it was about his afterlife in politics. Donald Trump stood on the stage like a man at the center of a prophecy. He called Charlie Kirk a martyr. Other politicians promised to carry out his mission. The crowd cheered as if the passing of the man had lit some sort of sacred fire. To me, this was not mourning, this was a mobilization. And here is where we have to tell the truth here. What we saw in that arena was not simply faith-finding public expression, it was religious nationalism on full display. That is the truth. That is my truth. This is my freedom of expression. This is my First Amendment right to be able to tell you the truth from my point of view. Not just from my point of view. This is what it is. The language is unmistakable.
Prick.
Take the nation back for God. Restore America's covenant. This is a holy calling. That's what it sounded like. This is not the language of democracy. This is the language of domination.
Okay. So, yeah. And that's one of the things that is so off-putting about the Democrats, the left nowadays, is they're so condescending. While you have the right has kind of encompassed like Tulsi Gabbard, who's more lefty, Robert F. Kennedy, who's more lefty. Yeah, we still have there's still J.D. Vance, there's Thomas Massey, there's Rand Paul. There's the right is such a huge coalition, and there's a lot of conversation and a lot of debate that's happening, and the left is so condescending, and it's such a turnoff. And they wonder why young men were attracted to Charlie Kirk and not to their message. It's because your message is condescending. Your message is it's so demeaning, the way that they speak and they act towards people, that people don't want anything to do with it. It's off-putting. Thomas Chatterton Williams, I've heard a lot. I don't know him well. I know he writes for The Atlantic. I don't really pay that much attention to him. I've heard some people say that he's rational and reasonable. I looked through his X account. I don't know how much that's true, but I'll let that be. He said, I've spent half my adult life living in one foreign country or another, and I don't think I've ever felt so estranged from the surrounding culture as I am from the aesthetics and sensibilities of this movement. Not even a criticism. I just feel more at home in Greece than in these images. And if I'm not mistaken, Matt Walsh said then leave or something like that. Because, Matt Walsh will just kind of tell you what he thinks. And he's pretty funny about the way he delivers it. So, yeah. But yeah, so the entitled class, the parasite class, as I like to call them, those that live off of the government tit, such as Don Lemon and Thomas Chatterton Williams, the corporate press in general, mainstream institutions and universities are not going to relate to the America that this represented. But this is, for all intents and purposes, the entire setup was the type of America I grew up in, the type of America I was around whenever I was a child. These kind of people, this kind of worship, these kind of speeches and sermons and motivational you know, um, speeches. This is America as far as millions and millions and millions of Americans are concerned. And it's worth preserving the Christian heritage of America, the Christianity of America, the family values, the traditional values, the debate, all the things that shooter tried to kill are worth preserving. And you saw it come together since Charlie's passing and how people have reacted in such a positive way. And, you know, just truly shown the spirit of what America is. And I really appreciate that. It's the first time in a long time that I've been like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit of national pride, It's the first time in many, many years that's been the case. And it's a lot of it is because of the way that people reacted to this tragedy, this event. Um, who would I be if I didn't share Miss Hillary Clinton's thoughts? Let me see, where's that?
Gotten to the more perfect union, and we fought a civil war. It's been a work in progress. We haven't gotten to the more perfect union, and we fought a civil war over part of it. And people have been protesting, for hundreds of years that, things were not as they should be, given our ideals and how we should be moving toward them. So I think that's what makes us so special as a country. And the idea that you could turn the clock back and try to recreate a world that never was, dominated by, let's say it, white men of a certain persuasion, a certain religion, a certain point of view, a certain ideology, is just doing such damage to what we should be aiming for. And we were on the path toward that. I mean, imperfectly, lots of, bumps along the way. But I agree with you. We were on the right trajectory. And I am proud of the fact that we have always been.
Okay. So you couldn't mention Christianity there. That would have hurt her. That would have hurt her street cred, I guess, if she would have said, Christian men think that this is their country. And yeah, we do. That's the way we were raised. They killed Charlie Kirk. And this is one thing that was so, I heard so many people point out was not only was Charlie Kirk killed, many people are celebrating it. And we all know this. And I'm not going to rage bait y'all. I'm not here to rage bait. I'm just walking through what I've been noticing. It's the celebrations and the excusing of his murder. He shouldn't have been killed, but he did say blah, 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 and he thought this, and he thought that, and he thought this. These people would excuse the murder of my grandfather. They would excuse the murder of my father. They would excuse the murder of my cousins and my uncles. These mainstream conservative, almost Reagan conservative. I mean, he was probably more of a Buchananite than a Reagan conservative, but I mean, he had a lot of Reagan conservatism to him. Like, this is mainstream conservatism they're calling fascist, and they're excusing the murder of. Let that sink in. They would kill 50% of the country and justify the murder of 50% of this country, if not 52, 53% of this country, because of the traditional values that people hold. That's been a real eye-opening experience the last couple of weeks, is how many people have just excused the fact that he was murdered because he said things they didn't like, that he held a traditional mindset, had traditional family values, was a Christian, and he was not afraid to go talk in public about it. and they wanted him to shut up. And I think a lot of them thought that when he died, that was the end of it, that they wouldn't have to hear anymore. But I have a feeling that they're going to be hearing it a lot more and a lot more publicly and a lot more vibrantly and with a lot more force and a lot less love and respect. Charlie was gentle about the way he talked with people. A lot of the people I know that want to take up that mantle are not gentle about the way they want to talk about it. They will get in your face and they will fight with you and they will argue with you and they will yell at you and they will scream at you because they're passionate about their belief system. And they know that the secularistic, atheistic side of the ledger, the Islamists, the Hindus, the atheists, the agnostics, they want to put an end to Christianity. And this is what Trump is talking about here in this clip. This was during his speech at the UN, which if you haven't watched it, it's 55 minutes long. I think it was supposed to be 15 minutes. They broke the teleprompter. So he went on a tirade and just roasted the UN for 55 minutes. Pretty remarkable stuff. I would suggest go listen to it. But there's this part that I wanted to play.
I hope that all countries who find inspiration in our example will join us in renewing our commitment, values, and those values, really, that we hold so dear together. Let us defend free speech and free expression. Let us protect religious liberty, including for the most persecuted religion on the planet today. It's called Christianity. So I hope.
Okay. Now, a lot of people are going to take issue with him saying Christianity is the most persecuted religion on the planet. But it absolutely is. I'll show you a chart here in a minute. But first, let's hear from Father Peter Heers, who's going to be on Counterflow next week. And I thought this just fit right in with the theme of today's show. Should we seek revenge against our enemies? Definitely go watch Counterflow next week and listen to Father Peter and Buck Johnson talk about that. But yeah, go to Counterflow next week.
Well, I mean, the Orthodox Christian impulse has to be, first of all, to not see it simply on the human level. I mean, this was allowed by God. So first of all, what's God doing here? Secondly, death is not the worst thing. Death is not the worst thing. We certainly have never believed that as Orthodox. Many people are saying that. And other people have said that to him. I think Kennedy said it to him. And that's a very Christian sentiment. There's much worse things than death, because if you're a Christian, you understand that this is a temporary departure of the soul from the body, that it's all coming to an end very quickly. There's going to be a new heaven and earth. So first of all, God allowed it. Secondly, death is not the worst. Third, my enemy is not, I mean, you can say these are my enemies, and it's true. We have there are enemies of the church, in the sense as those who are opposed to the church. But as Father Peter, as an individual, I don't have an enemy in the sense of I'm going to go after him and destroy him. I have my passions. I have the old man. I have the temptations of the flesh and the devil and the spirit of the world. These are the things that are my enemy. The person who has succumbed to the enemy of salvation, the devil, become a Satanist or totally impassioned and is hateful. That person is a victim, the worst kind of victim, who's on the path to eternal damnation. And so for him and for every one of us, Christ came and died and extends a hand of salvation. So if we are truly of Christ, in Christ, and we live for Christ, we can't but see them as Christ's image. We can never lose sight of the image of God in every single human being, no matter how inhuman they become in their activities and actions. We have to see that, because if we don't see Christ's image, then we become like them, and we become like the devil, who makes everything impersonal and loses sight of God's image and wants to stamp it out. So it's very, very basic and important as an Orthodox Christian, as somebody who is living the mystery of Christ, that we never lose sight of the image of God in every human being. And therefore, there's no thought, there's not any reaction on that level There's a hatred of sin. Absolutely. You cannot overcome sin if you don't hate it. But there's a love of every sinner. And precisely because we hate sin and we distinguish it from the man or the sinner, therefore we're even more compassionate and loving for that sinner because we know how destructive sin is. In other words, the departure from communion and the will of God. So I can't imagine any serious Orthodox Christian having a temptation to become vengeful, hateful, destructive. Not only is that just unconscionable, but it's foolish.
All right. There you go, Buck. There's your free ad. I'll give you a little free plug there. I saw that pop up when I was getting all my tabs together, and I was like, oh, I got to add that in. So give Buck a little free shout out there. But yeah, go check out Father Peter Hears on Counterflow next week. And, that's a little taste of what you're going to hear. Let's dig into some of this stuff. Let me see. What do I got here? No. We're not going to get there yet. We're going to talk about anarcho-tyranny. DOJ. Tutu must be over here. Dang it. Okay, yeah. Here we go. Record high hostility and violence against churches in America. And this chart shows in 2018, there was less than 100 instances of churches being attacked. By November of 2023, it was up to 426, 430 right here. It says they documented more than 430 instances in 2023. That's an 800% increase in incidents since 2018 and an average of 39 attacks every month that you're seeing. I would expect after the memorial service to Charlie Kirk that will tick up some more. Because the left is very angry that we didn't do like they did in 2020. In 2020, the left allowed their passions to take them over, and they burned down cities, causing $2 billion in damage, killed hundreds of people, injured hundreds more, all over the death of a crackhead. And here we are, the death of one of the most thought-provoking conservative leaders America's seen in years, was shot and killed in cold blood, assassinated in front of the world. And people prayed. They were disciplined. They didn't give in to their passions. They controlled themselves. They controlled their emotions. And they turned to God. They didn't turn to violence. They didn't turn to destruction. The devil knows only to steal, kill, and destroy. But Christians, Christ, God, we build. That's our job. We build. Tom Woods talks about this and how the Catholic Church created Western civilization, about the building process, the idea that the Christian mindset is one of creation and building and beautifying the world, not destroying it, not nihilism, but love. Yeah. And then internationally, globally, I'll accept the necessary cookies. This is the World Watch List Open Doors annual ranking of the 50 countries where Christians face the most extreme persecution. Explore each country profile and download the detailed dossier for in-depth blah, blah, blah. More than 380 million Christians suffer high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. So this map here, I'm just going to go to the list. I'm not going to get into like deep details here. So North Korea, the persecution source, communist, post-communist oppression. Their main religion is agnosticism, and they have a score of 98. And these are the red countries. Many of them are Muslim countries. Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, Eritrea. Nigeria is considered a Christian country, but the Islamic oppression, their fundamentalist Islamists are attack Christians. Pakistan is Islam, Muslim. Iran, Muslim. Afghanistan, Muslim. You get the point. It's worldwide Christianity is the most oppressed and persecuted religion. And then we can go to this report here. New report details the extent of the FBI's weaponization of law enforcement against traditional Catholics. Today, the House Judiciary Committee and its select subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government released an interim staff report titled FBI's Breach of Religious Freedom, the Weaponization of Law Enforcement Against Catholic Americans. The Committee on the Judiciary and the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government have been investigating the Federal Bureau of Investigation's categorization of certain Catholic Americans as potential domestic terrorists. While the FBI claims it does not categorize investigations as domestic terrorism based on the religious beliefs to include Catholicism of the subject involved, an FBI-wide memorandum originating from the FBI Richmond Field Office did just that. Under the guise of tackling the threat of domestic terrorism, the memorandum painted so-called certain radical traditionalist Catholics as violent extremists and proposed opportunities for the FBI to infiltrate Catholic churches as a form of threat mitigation. Now, if we were going to see radical traditionalist Catholics, RTCs as they call it, engage in violent extremism, would you think that'd be happening right now? When you think that the murder, the assassination of a very traditionalist public speaker would have triggered off some of that violent rage that these Catholics hold within? But that's not what we're saying. It's not what we're seeing at all. They go on to then, instead of just attacking religion, they attack the family. And they labeled parents as terrorist threats because they go to PTA meetings and disagree with the curriculum that the schools are teaching their children, because they don't believe that they're your children. They believe that they are their children, that they have authority over these children. Now, let's talk a minute about how we got here before we move on with any of this other stuff, because I got several more tabs pulled up. Let's talk about how we got here. And I have some notes on my phone. I'll be reading a lot of what I have to say off my notes because I've just been jotting stuff down for the last few days. Oh, that's sweet. Sherry Voluntary just texted me. I'm going to have to text her back after I'm done here. I hadn't talked to her in years. She's a sweetheart. Okay. So how did we get to this place, this government? Where are we? I've been getting that question a lot lately. Where are we as a country? Where are we as a people, as a nation? Where are we? I'm just a truck driver. I don't know why anybody asked me, but that's the question I get. I mean, from people at work, from my own mom, people at the Institute. I get asked all the time, where are we? What do you think? After the Charlie Kirk assassination, a lot of people have been asking me that. And so I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And I was texting with Buck the other night, and I was telling him, I was like, I don't mind doing solo episodes. I was like, but man, when people have like a specific question they want me to cover, it puts a lot of pressure on me. I feel like, ugh, I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to do it the wrong way. I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that people follow my thought process and the way I'm looking at things. And, you know, um, all these tabs up on my screen, I'm on browser, you know, I've been having to try to like maneuver through them and make sure I get, have them in some order that seems rational to me. Sitting down, jotting down notes and kind of my thought process on how we got here. And I take it back to the Industrial Revolution. Um, the Industrial Revolution ushered in a new form of politics. And in the early 1900s, progressivism took hold. And they called 1900 to about 1920 the Progressive Era. Teddy Roosevelt really solidified progressivism from a right-wing perspective when he started the Bull Moose Party and ran for office. Woodrow Wilson ended up winning that election, who was a left-wing progressive. So Teddy Roosevelt had split the right-wing votes, and Woodrow Wilson ended up winning the presidency. And that delivered to us the Federal Reserve, which then developed into this financial catastrophe that we see today. But both flares of progressive ideology, whether it's left or right, were intent on expanding governmental roles and power. Much like communism, the founders of progressivism realized it only worked by expanding beyond the borders of a nation, acting as a purely global ideology. Like a decade and a half later, after World War II, the mythology of America's victory over fascism replaced the American Revolution as the founding of a new nation, the nation of world empire. America escaped as the lone superpower determined to expand its hegemony across the globe. By allowing nations to tariff our goods while our nation raises its money by taxing citizens, work to build Europe in our image as dukes and duchesses to our world monarchy. A little over a decade after that, the American people were introduced to our new founding documents, the Civil Rights Act. A bureaucratic system had been slowly growing, perpetuating itself, creating problems to solve, engaging in soft power and militarism around the world. Rather than solving problems, the nightmare of the Leviathan naturally acted to preserve jobs and income of useless bureaucrats, writing legislation, growing the state to encroachment on citizens' daily lives. With the new founding myth securely in place and both parties on board with the progressive ideals, the only problem were backwards, uneducated, no college, Christian lovers of our original founding. Through manipulation, a monopoly on the media, universities, institutions, and inflationary policies, most voices were trampled out, distracted with survival and consumerism, and the demonization of Christian values and culture. Obama put a stamp on this when he rejected America as a Christian nation and called those calling themselves lovers of liberty and conservatives as bitter clingers, clinging to our guns and our religion. Y'all remember that? Clinging to our guns and our religion. Shortly after that, George Soros began dumping tons of money into the coffers of these NGOs. These NGOs then began to pour that money into progressive attorneys that then became attorney general or district attorneys of certain regions. Anarcho-tyranny shortly followed. And that's where we find ourselves today. Those of us who enjoy liberty, who believe in conserving traditional values, family values, Christian values, are staring down the barrel of anarcho tyranny. They tried for years in the first Trump administration and throughout the Biden administration to censor us, to silence us, to shut us up. But the internet's too powerful. We found ways around it. We kept talking. We created independent media. And now we have convinced tens of millions of people, not only in the United States, but around the world, that the founding Christian ethos of America is the eternal ethos that countries should strive to live for. That America isn't an idea, it's a nation, a country that was founded on values, ideas, and a religious fervor that that the elites, the parasite class, have tried to strip from us, have tried to take away from us, and have demonized us for continuing to pursue. But through this independent media, we've been able to talk about these things and to spread these words and this wisdom that have been passed down from our founders. Now, before we get into the founders, I want to talk about Teddy Roosevelt for a minute. I've heard people say that they believe that Trump's legacy, if he's successful, is going to be very close to that of Teddy Roosevelt on taking on big business, the banks, taking on the corrupt power structure that's embedded in Washington, D.C., rooting out USAID, rooting out all these bureaucrats, getting rid of these corrupt judges, and bringing us closer to what we were meant to be. I can't say for sure. I mean, I've heard some historians talk about this, and I thought it was interesting, but I ran across this yesterday. Not this. This. I ran across this yesterday, and I was like, this does sound like something Trump would say. It said, it's not as Trumpian as Trump would say it, but it's the same type of vibe. So Teddy Roosevelt, no room in this country for hyphenated Americans. There is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. When I refer to hyphenated Americans, I do not refer to naturalized Americans. Some of the very best Americans I have ever known were naturalized Americans, Americans born abroad. But a hyphenated American is not an American at all. This is just as true of the man who puts native before the hyphen as of the man who puts German or Irish or English or French or Muslim or Somalian or Mexican or gay or whatever before the hyphen. Americanism is a matter of the spirit and of the soul. Our allegiance must be purely to the United States. We must unsparingly condemn any man who holds any other allegiance. But if he is heartily and singly loyal to this republic, then no matter where he was born, he is just as good an American as anyone else. The one absolutely certain way of bringing this nation to ruin, of preventing all possibility of its continuing to be a nation at all, would be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities, an intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans, French Americans, Scandinavian Americans, or Italian Americans, each preserving its separate nationality, each at heart feeling more sympathy with Europeans of that nationality than with the other citizens of the American Republic. The men who do not become Americans and nothing else are hyphenated Americans, and there ought to be no room for them in this country. The man who calls himself an American citizen and who yet shows by his actions that he is primarily the citizen of a foreign land plays a thoroughly mischievous part in the life of our body politic. He has no place here, and the sooner he returns to the land to which he feels his real heart allegiance, the better it will be for every good American. This was an address to the Knights of Columbus, October 12th, 1915. This reminded me not only of Trump in the way that Trump feels about America. He has a very, very Teddy Roosevelt style feeling about America. No matter what we think about Teddy Roosevelt's politics of the Bull Moose Party, wanting to expand his power, introducing progressivism in that way, he was purely American through and through. He's known as being a real tough guy. But it reminded me of a conversation I heard Tucker Carlson have the other day when he was talking about multiculturalism and how no nation is multicultural. If you have a multicultural nation, then you have a nation at war with itself, because one culture is going to have to dominate over the other culture. And that's what we're seeing in America these days. We're seeing this multiculturalism fight against traditional values, traditionalism. And there is no better place to go with that than Ilhan Omar. When Ilhan Omar, when is this? No, I don't know. Close this. Ilhan Omar says she's here to protect the interest of Somalia. While speaking Somali to representatives in her constituency, Omar gave a speech to a group of Somali American, hyphenated American constituents reacting to a supposed move by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to assist a region province in Somalia in becoming a sovereign state. So you have this area in Somalia that's in between Somalia and Ethiopia that has called itself a sovereign state. It hasn't been recognized by any other country, but it's Somaliland, and they are self-governing. They, the citizens there have voted to leave Somalia because of the corruption and violence of Somalia. They don't want any part of Ethiopia because of the corruption and violence of Ethiopia. So they democratically chose to be their own nation, to be their own sovereign country. And this person, Omar, who's so worried about democracy and threats to democracy, doesn't respect the democratic ideals of the citizens of Somaliland. Instead, she says her job is to preserve Somaliland as part of Somalia. Well, no, that's not your job at all, Congresswoman. Your job is to represent the citizens of your district. That's what your job is in Congress. You should have nothing to do with Somalia. You don't live in Somalia. If you want to be worried about Somalian politics, then move to Somalia. But this globalist network of progressives believes that we have to have our fingers involved in everything and construct everything to our likeness in order to create this multicultural world that acts as one nation. It's a complete utopian dream. We'll never get there. And their followers are shooting ICE facilities, police officers, ICE officers, Charlie Kirk, ABC affiliates, burning down cities, shooting Trump supporters, shooting up churches. That was creepy. Something fell. Okay. And we're just supposed to tolerate it. Then you have AOC slamming right-wing influencer on House floor. I'm surprised she didn't call him a fascist, which is what the word they like to throw around, because anything that's right of Bernie Sanders is fascism, apparently. Then we have the anarcho-tyranny that I talked about. 19-year-old free on bond accused of raping 67-year-old woman just weeks after being found mentally competent. So this 19-year-old kid had been arrested for assault. The judge decided, well, we can't tell if this kid's competent or not, so we need to send him in for an evaluation. So we're going to set him out on his own recognizance. Okay. Mentally incompetent person on his own recognizance to go and get tested to see if he's competent to stand trial. Comes back that he was competent to stand trial. So they threw him in a halfway house. The halfway house then moved him to a mental institute because he was causing issues at the halfway house. And while at the mental institute, he raped a 67-year-old woman. We have Irina Zarutska's murderer, in which, in order to make up for past discrimination, they let a man who committed 14 felonies out so that he can get that white girl. I don't know what that is. We have 58 shot over Labor Day weekend in Chicago as governor rejects Trump threat to send National Guard. 3 charged for shots fired near the Iraq during baseball game. This is a baseball field that my kids used to play at in Katy, Texas. 3 men are facing felony charges in Waller County after shots were fired near the rack in Katy during a baseball game. 1 coach was injured and released from the hospital the same day after being shot in the shoulder. So you have these 3 Islamists: Mahmoud Abdel-Salam Rababa, Ahmed Mawed, Mustafa Mohammed Matalga. 3 Islamists shooting up baseball fields in Katy. I saw another one. Let me see. Is this the rack? So the story here is, mom says she's not. So the story is here that the coach of this baseball team had taken the field with his players, his little league players, and was saying a prayer. And these 3 guys got so offended that this Christian man was saying a prayer with the little league team that they shot him and tried to kill him. Luckily, they didn't kill him, but they tried. I mean, this is anarcho-tyranny. What is this? Okay, we'll get to this in a minute. Close this. Okay, so you'll hear people say, we are not a Christian nation. You hear it all the time. America is not a Christian nation. It is not in the Constitution. Well, John Adams stated, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. George Washington, virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. Thomas Jefferson emphasized, no government can continue good but under the people's control, and their minds are to be informed by education what is right and wrong, to be encouraged in virtuous habits and deterred from vice. James Madison, to suppose any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without virtue in the people is a chimerical idea. Benjamin Franklin, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. Patrick Henry, a vitiated state of morals, a corrupted public conscience is incapable with freedom. Oh, incompatible, not incapable. Incompatible with freedom. Thomas Jefferson championed an educational system that would cultivate virtue and civic responsibility. He founded the University of Virginia to produce enlightened leaders who would carry forward the public's principles. Jefferson proposed education should focus on moral instruction, enabling individuals to distinguish right from wrong and foster commitment to the public good. James Madison emphasized education served as a check against tyranny by promoting an informed citizenry capable of critical thinking. Madison's background ingrained the belief that education was indispensable for inculcating self-restraint, civic duty, and public spiritedness. Benjamin Rush contributed significantly, emphasizing integrated civic education with moral instruction, ensuring students understood their duties as future Republic citizens. Religion and morality. Religion and morality were foundational pillars in the Founding Fathers' vision for the nascent American Republic. The founders recognized that while a constitution could outline governance's framework, the citizenry's moral fabric would ultimately uphold or undermine it. They believed religious principles were intrinsic to maintaining a virtuous and self-governing populace, while liberty and public order could coexist harmoniously. John Adams was vocal about religion's indispensable role in sustaining morality. He emphasized the Constitution was designed only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to govern any other. For Adams, the connection between religion, morality, and republicanism was clear-cut. The intrinsic values promoted by religion were essential in nurturing a communal spirit conducive to self-governance. Benjamin Franklin held similar views on religion and morality's symbiotic relationship. While he held a broad deist perspective, he did not discount religious practices' societal benefits. Franklin saw organized religion as a vital institution for instilling the moral virtues necessary for self-governance. James Madison argued religion was a pillar providing moral restraint, helping curb excesses that could otherwise lead to tyranny and discord. He saw religious liberty as a republic cornerstone, believing genuine religious practice contributed to the common good by promoting ethical behavior and reinforcing community bonds. George Washington highlighted religion's role in his farewell address, remarking, "Of all dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports." Washington understood that while government mechanics were crucial, they were insufficient without religion's moral underpinnings. Thomas Jefferson, despite advocacy for a strict separation of church and state, recognized religious principles' societal value. By emphasizing personal morality and responsibility's importance, Jefferson echoed the broader consensus among the founders that religion and morality were vital to the republic's endurance and citizens' well-being. Patrick Henry declared that a vitiated state of morals, a corrupted public conscience, is incompatible with freedom. For Henry, moral standards degeneration was a clear and present danger to the republic's existence. Religious practice was seen as a personal virtue and a societal necessity to uphold liberty and democratic governance ideals. The founders acknowledged religious practices fosters the virtues necessary for self-rule's complex task and the common good's pursuit. As they saw it, a society steeped in these moral and religious principles would be better equipped to sustain the republic's freedoms and responsibilities. Now, George Washington's farewell address. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but people know the part, am I gay test, right in the middle of this. Go figure. People know the part towards the end of his farewell address where he talks about entangling alliances and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. if I'm not mistaken, this farewell address used to get read like every year in Congress, until some atheist got, either the war party or the atheists got um, offended by it. Whatever. I mean, what's the difference between war party and atheist? To me, they're pretty much the same. But this part really stuck out to me. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason, and experience, both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric. Sorry, I'm looking. I got something else I want to pull up real quick, but I forgot to pull it up. All right. Promote then as an object of primary importance institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge, in proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion. It is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. And by enlightened, he's talking about morality, religion. We'll get to this in a bit. I'm going to actually take a little break here in a second, and I'm going to get to that after that. Pat Buchanan, who I'm sure all of y'all have some idea who Pat Buchanan is. If not, go get one of his books and read it. He was a brilliant paleoconservative, great on war. He said, when the faith dies, the culture dies, the civilization dies, and the people die. I believe that that's where we are in this country. That a lot of faith, a lot of people's faith in God and morality and religion has died. The culture has been decaying and dying. The civilization is fighting for its last breath. And if the civilization goes, then we're in a heap of trouble because a lot more people are going to die. And that's really where I see us at this moment. That we have an opportunity to try to preserve our traditions, our values, our standard of living, our love for God, our love for liberty, our love for our traditions, our family values. But in order to do that, we're going to have to stand grounded, and we're going to have to face down those wishing to persecute us. And I heard Matt Erickson was talking about this the other day, right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and he said, Metal Singer performs Amazing Grace. I'm sorry, I get distracted. Squirrel. Um, he had said that a lot of people misunderstand the verse in the Bible that talks about turning the other cheek. That it is not a call to pacifism. It's a call to stand your ground. And without any cultural knowledge, without the understanding of what the culture of that time, and this is where a lot of Christians get a lot of things in the Bible wrong, is a misunderstanding of what the culture of that time was. That culture, that culture was a slave culture. The Romans used to make fun of the of Christians because they called the religion a religion of slaves and women. And that's why there's a lot of talk about slavery and submission to your masters in the Bible. It wasn't advocating for slavery, it was just acknowledging the human condition at that point in time when those stories were taking place. And so, whenever it says turn the other cheek, you have to remember back then they wiped their ass with their left hand. So when a slave master would slap its slave, he would backhand the slave with his right hand. And what Christ was saying was when they slap you, when they backhand you with their right hand, turn the other cheek. Now they can either front hand slap you with the palm of their hand, which uplifts you to their standards. It uplifts you in their eyes, in the eyes of those around that see you being slapped. Now you're like basically being challenged to a duel. You're being slapped like a gentleman, right? With an open hand slap. But if they backhand you with their left hand, their shit wiping hand, so to speak, then it demeans them. It's embarrassing to them. It's an embarrassment for them to use that hand in that way. It shows them to be cowardly. It shows them to be disgusting. And then it lowers them to your standards, to the standard of a slave. And so when Christ was saying, turn the other cheek, he was saying, do exactly what was done at the Charlie Kirk Memorial. Stand your ground. Speak up loudly for what you believe. And let them bring themselves, let them embarrass themselves, let them show themselves for who they are. And that's what he was saying. Now I'm going to play this. I'm going to run to the restroom real quick. I have something I want to read to y'all, but my throat's a little parched, so I want to take a little bit of a break on my throat. So here's about, it says it's 4 minutes, so I'm going to start this up and just think about what I just said.
Today, we're going to be putting each other on the hot seat with 2 facts and 1 future flex. I want to...
Gotta love the ads, right? All right, I'll be right back. So good. Oh, I found that really good. And I know they were playing that on as a breaker on his show. So after listening to all this that I've kind of laid out here, and I'm sure there are plenty of things that y'all disagree with, and I'm sure that there will be plenty of emails coming into me that hopefully I see them all. Y'all are welcome to email me. I will answer every one of them I can if I have the opportunity. If anybody wants to have a conversation about this, I'm very open and willing to have a conversation. I will email you back as soon as I can and as best I can if I see it. I can already think of some people that I'll hear from about this. It's been 15 days since Charlie Kirk has passed away. It's 15 days of mourning. 15 days of the 40 days of mourning. 40 is a very important number in Christianity. And so just like Lent is 40 days, when someone passes, you you mourn for 40 days. But some people are going to be like, well, what do you do? What do you do? Yeah, you stand up, you hold your ground, you make them look like fools, make them show themselves for who they are. But is that all you can do? We got a story here of St. Gabriel of Georgia, a fool for Christ who defied Soviet atheism. And he's one of the first saints I had ever heard of, was St. Gabriel. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his real name. I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's no way I could say that. So I'm not even going to try. But St. Gabriel of Georgia is one of the most revered modern saints of the Orthodox Christian world. Living under the heavy yoke of communist atheism in the 20th century, he courageously confessed Christ in both word and deed, becoming a living icon of humility, asceticism, and prophetic zeal. His life exemplifies the deepest mysteries of Orthodox Christianity and offers a radiant testimony of unwavering faith, even in the face of systemic persecution and social rejection. St. Gabriel lived in Georgia in the 20th century and passed away in 1995. He was one of the greatest ascetic figures in the country. Enlightened by divine grace, he lived as a fool for Christ and a confessor. Due to his deep Orthodox faith, he opposed the atheistic regime of his time and was persecuted for many years. In 2012, he was canonized by the Apostolic Autocephalous Orthodox Church of Georgia with the name Saint Father Gabriel the Confessor and Fool for Christ. His memory is honored annually on November 2nd. Saint Gabriel was born on August 26, 1929, in Tbilisi, Georgia. While Saint Gabriel of Georgia, whose birth name was Guderdzi, now I got to try to say it, Ergabadze, was raised during the Soviet era in Georgia, then part of the USSR. His family lived under the pervasive influence of communist ideology. His father was a Communist Party functionary, a role common in that time and place. However, there is no clear evidence that his mother was a committed communist. Her personal convictions remain less defined in the available sources. What is clear is that young Guderdzi grew up in an environment shaped by the ideological dominance of atheism and materialism imposed by the regime. Despite these circumstances, St. Gabriel displayed early signs of deep spiritual sensitivity and a personal thirst for truth. Rather than absorbing the secular and anti-Christian worldview of the time, he embarked on a path of prayer, humility, and repentance. His later decision to embrace monasticism and live as a fool for Christ reflects not a familial or political inheritance, but a profound personal conversion and spiritual calling. His life is a striking testament to how divine grace can lead a soul from the heart of a secular world into the luminous heights of sanctity. In his youth, he secretly attended church services and began reading the lives of the saints. Eventually, he abandoned worldly ambitions and became a monk, taking the name Gabriel. The name would become a symbol of spiritual defiance and love for Christ amid a society determined to suppress all religious expression. St. Gabriel's public confession of Christ became legendary in Soviet Georgia. In 1965, during an official state parade, he climbed a building in Tbilisi and set fire to a massive portrait of Vladimir Lenin, the symbol of atheistic power in the USSR. The act was not political but spiritual, a cry against the idolatry of the regime. For this, he was arrested, beaten, and declared insane. He was placed in a mental institution where he was imprisoned and tortured. However, his calm demeanor and radiant peace unsettled even the most skeptical doctors. One physician, seeing Gabriel's profound serenity, said, "This man is not mad, he is a saint." This moment of resistance became a turning point in Georgian spiritual memory. By burning the image of Lenin, St. Gabriel was proclaiming Christ as the only King and Lord, a theological act of martyrdom within the framework of Orthodox Christianity. After his release, St. Gabriel chose to live as a fool for Christ, a rare and ancient form of spiritual warfare in Orthodox Christianity. In this tradition, a person voluntarily adopts the appearance of madness in order to conceal their virtue and endure humiliation for the sake of Christ. He wandered barefoot, wore rags, lived in poverty, and often behaved in ways that scandalized the proud but humbled the discerning. He would sit at trash heaps, speak in riddles, and expose hypocrisy with divine boldness. The world saw madness, but the faithful saw prophecy. This holy foolishness is deeply rooted in Orthodox tradition. It was a shield for Gabriel. It protected him from both pride and fame and allowed him to speak spiritual truths others would have been killed for. Spiritual gifts and miraculous testimonies. As his fame spread, thousands began to seek him out. Though he never advertised himself as a miracle worker or a prophet, countless people testified to his clairvoyance, healings, and prophetic words. Many faithful will recount being healed of incurable diseases after visiting St. Gabriel or being blessed with his cross. In one famous case, a woman declared infertile for years gave birth to a healthy child after a brief encounter with the saint, during which he simply said, "Next year you will carry life." St. Gabriel would often speak directly to a person's conscience without being told anything. One man approached him asking for prayer, and before he could speak, Gabriel responded, "Your brother has already forgiven you." The man burst into tears, having quarreled with his brother years ago and never reconciled. After his repose in 1995, St. Gabriel's relics were exhumed and found incorrupted. They began to stream fragrant myrrh, which has become a source of consolation and healing for pilgrims. The fragrance is so intense and sweet that it is considered a clear sign of divine grace. Monastics who lived near him testify that St. Gabriel never slept a full night. He prayed for the world, cried for the sins of others, and bore the pain of many spiritually. He would often be heard whispering prayers of mercy for unknown souls and enemies. During his life, St. Gabriel was often misunderstood and mocked, even by churchgoers. Many accused him of madness or heresy. Some priests shunned him. But those with spiritual eyes saw a different reality. He was loved deeply by the poor, the sick, and those broken by life. They felt his warmth, his smile, and his embrace. Over time, his spiritual stature could not be hidden. People began to revere him. Crowds came to his monastery, and his small cell became a place of pilgrimage. Even before his death, many called him our starets, or elder, and spiritual father of the nation. Saint Gabriel spoke little, but when he did, his words struck deeply. They were the fruit of silence, prayer, and suffering. Many of his sayings are now inscribed in churches and homes throughout Georgia. Love is higher than cannons. Even the devil believes in God. True faith is revealed through love. If you lose love, you lose Christ. Pray without ceasing. Even your breath should cry, Lord, have mercy. God listens most to the prayer of the one who is most humble. These sayings reflect the heart of Orthodox Christianity, an emphasis on humility, divine love, repentance, and union with Christ. His emphasis on love did not contradict church dogma, it fulfilled it. St. Gabriel was repeatedly monitored, harassed, and detained by Soviet authorities. His 1965 act of iconoclastic protest, burning the Lenin portrait, resulted in imprisonment, abuse, and forced psychiatric evaluations. He was labeled a lunatic not because he was insane, but because he dared to live according to a faith the state could not tolerate. Even after his release, he remained under suspicion. His monastery cell was sometimes raided, and some of his spiritual children were interrogated, but he never compromised. He once said, "Better to be called mad for Christ than wise in a world that hates him." In 2012, St. Gabriel was officially canonized by the Autocephalous Orthodox Church of Georgia as St. Gabriel the Confessor and Fool for Christ. This act confirmed that the faithful already knew that he was a vessel of the Holy Spirit, a spiritual father for modern times, and a bright star in the firmament of Orthodox Christianity. His feast day is celebrated on November 2nd, and his relics housed at Samtavro Monastery in Umskechka, I don't know how to say that, draw pilgrims from all over the world. Icons of St. Gabriel often depict him barefoot with a cross or in monastic garments with fire, symbolizing his burning love for God. St. Gabriel's relevance is more potent today than ever. In an age of confusion, cynicism, and spiritual apathy, he shines as a model of bold faith, absolute humility, authentic orthodoxy. He did not adapt orthodoxy to the world, but called the world to repentance. His life echoes the wisdom of the Desert Fathers, the prophetic fire of the Old Testament, and the boundless love of Christ crucified. He proved that even under a tyranny, a soul illumined by the Holy Spirit can become a lighthouse for generations. The more you humble yourself, the more God reveals himself to you. This is the mystery of the saints, St. Gabriel. St. Gabriel of Georgia is not merely a national figure, but a universal witness to the power of Orthodox Christianity, authentic faith. Through his suffering, silence, foolishness, and clairvoyant wisdom, he brought countless souls to Christ. His canonization is a call to all Orthodox Christians to return to the fundamentals: love, repentance, humility, and endurance. May we, like St. Gabriel, find the courage to confess Christ in our daily lives, not only through words, but through lives saturated in grace. So, the reckoning is, what do we do? What do we do? Well, what we do is we create a revolution in our own hearts and our own lives to better ourselves, to strengthen our walk with God, our faith in Christ. And as you see in the death of Charlie Kirk, thousands, if not millions around the world have been touched and have turned back to faith and have began to proclaim their faith, a reemergence, a revival of faith. That's what you do. You're not going to win. You're not going to beat the devil at his own game. He's already been defeated. The victory is yours to take. All you have to do is accept it. And though I struggle daily I struggle to live the life of Christian values and a decent person that loves even those that hate me. At least I struggle with it, and I don't give up. And that's the key. Don't give up. Struggle. Pick up your cross, follow him, struggle. And that's how we fight back. That's how we take our country back. And that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to tell us. So, where are we? I don't know. But I think we're tracking in the right direction at this point in time. And we just got to keep our eyes affixed on Christ. Anyway, this was a long one. I'm sure I lost some of y'all. Any of y'all have anything to ask? TommySalmons@gmail.com. And, I enjoyed it. Thanks.